Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy set of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard. The building was old enough now and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all left out as offices. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door of his house, except that it was very large. Also, that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also, Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London. And yet Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face, with a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but it looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up upon its ghostly forehead. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. He said, "Pooh, pooh," and closed the door with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellar below appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door, walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly trimming his candle as he went. And up Scrooge went, not caring a button for being a very dark. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut the heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. Small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel upon the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody under the closet, and nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Quite satisfied, he closed the door and locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom, and thus secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the very low fire to take in his gruel. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room, and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building. And it was with great astonishment that, with a strange, inexplicable dread, that as he looked he saw this bell begin to swing. Soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This was succeeded by a clanking noise, and deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the cask in the wine merchant's cellar. And then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. It came in through the heavy door, and a specter passed into the room before his eyes. And upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up, and though it cried, "I know him, Marley's ghost!" The same face, the very same face. Marley, in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him looking through his waistcoat, could see 2 buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard that Marley had had no bowels, and he had never believed it until now. No, nor did he believe it even now, though he looked the phantom through and through, saw it standing there before him, and though he felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes and noticed the very texture of the folded kerchief bound upon its head and chin, he was still incredulous. "How now?" said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much." Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Well, who were you then?" "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." "Well, can you sit down?" "I can." "Well, do it then." Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace as if he were quite used to it. "You don't believe in me." "I don't." "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond your senses?" "I don't know." "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. Oh, you may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are." Now, Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, and nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. The truth is that he tried to be smart as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his horror. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round its head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down upon its breast. "Mercy, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me? Why do the spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?" "It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk ahead and amongst his fellow men, travel far and wide, and if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to death. I cannot tell you all I would. A very little more is permitted to me. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me. In my life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary's journey lie before me. 7 years dead, and traveling all the time? You travel fast, on the wings of the wind. You might have got over a great quantity of ground in 7 years. Oh, blind, blind man, not to know the ages of incessant labor by immortal creatures. For this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, wherever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one life's opportunities misused. Yet I was like this man. I once was like this man. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob, faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. Business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, Forbearance, benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. It held up its chain at arm's length as if it were the cause of its unavailing grief and flung it heavily upon the ground. At this time of year I suffer most. Why did I walk through the crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, and never to raise them to that blessed star which led wise men to the poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which the light would have conducted me? Scrooge was very dismayed to hear the specter going on at this rate, and he began to quake exceedingly. Hear me, my time is nearly gone. I will, but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, pray. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. You were always a good friend to me. Thank ye. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? I think I'd rather not. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow night when the bell tolls 1. Expect the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us. It walked backwards away from him. At every step it took, the window raised itself a little so that when the apparition reached it, it was wide open, and it floated out through the self-open window into the bleak, dark night. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double-locked as he locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. Scrooge tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. And being, from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or the glimpses of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, he went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep on the instant.